The issue of housing asylum seekers in hotels across the UK has become a flashpoint for protest, controversies, and political debate. And police are preparing for another Saturday of protest today. The policy, which ramped up during the pandemic and surged further under ridiculous Home Secretaries like Priti Patel and Suella Braverman, has led to widespread backlash. Protesters, including residents in towns like Epping and Norwich, have raised concerns about the social impact of housing asylum seekers in local hotels. And these protests, often organised under slogans like "Protect our community" or "Safety of women and children before foreigners," are fuelled by fears that the presence of large groups of asylum seekers, many of whom are single men, could lead to increased crime and social instability. Of course, much of this is to project onto asylum seekers in these hotels the principles of the ghetto, which started up in Venice to house the Jewish community, and all manner of accusations were then thrown at the Jewish community. The idea of this crime and social instability is in many ways an illusion, but keeping people locked up in limbo is not a solution. The situation has also prompted criticism over a lack of transparency and accountability from the Home Office regarding the identities and the backgrounds of those being housed, or indeed of those who are then accused of crimes. The most significant tension revolves around the growing costs of the hotel system. In 2025, the government estimated an £8 million spend per day, approximately £3 billion annually, on housing asylum seekers in hotels. This enormous sum, at times rising to £108 million per month, has led to debates about whether the money could be better spent elsewhere. For example, redirecting even a fraction of the hotel bill into staffing the Home Office to process asylum claims more quickly could lead to significant savings. In fact, it's estimated that £100 million per year would be enough to fund 2,000 additional caseworkers, enough to clear a significant portion of the asylum backlog within a year. And speeding up the decision-making process would not only reduce costs, but would also allow asylum seekers to be placed into dispersal housing, work, or return to their home countries more quickly. This proposal, however, faces opposition from those who argue that the asylum seekers' presence in local communities is harmful, particularly when cases involving crime or perceived misuse of the asylum system arise. In one notorious instance, the arrest of an asylum seeker in a hotel in Epping on charges of sexual assault and harassment sparked a wave of protests and amplified fears about safety. Critics claim that the government is failing to properly vet asylum seekers, leading to tensions between migrants and local communities. Additionally, protests have been further stoked by the perception that asylum seekers are abusing the system, living in relative comfort at taxpayers' expense without contributing to society. While there is no doubt that some far-right elements are involved in the protests, it's clear that there's also a broader discontent among communities about the government's approach. Asylum seekers who have been housed in these hotels, such as Vail from Libya, expressed frustration with the slow pace of decision-making and the uncertainty surrounding their futures. Vail, for example, longs for work and integration into society, but is stuck in a limbo created by the inefficiency of the system. In many European countries, asylum seekers are allowed to work after a relatively short period, usually 3 to 6 months, which helps to reduce the reliance on welfare and accommodation. For example, Belgium allows asylum seekers to work after 4 months, Ireland after 6 months. The positive effects of allowing asylum seekers to work earlier are well documented, including increased tax revenue, faster integration, and reduced dependency on state support. In contrast, the UK's policy, which restricts asylum seekers from working until their claim has been processed, exacerbates the problem of over-reliance on taxpayer-funded accommodation. The concept of the hostile environment, introduced by Theresa May in 2012, continues to shape the UK's approach to immigration. It's created a climate where compliance is prioritized over humane treatment and timely decision-making, and the culture has resulted in a slow processing system, which in turn has contributed to the widespread use of hotels as temporary accommodation. And addressing this issue requires not just additional caseworkers, but also a rethinking of the entire immigration system, including streamlining processes and enhancing transparency. So while current protests reflect significant concerns about the social impact of asylum seekers being held in hotels, the root of the issue lies in the inefficiency of the system and the lack of investment in infrastructure necessary to process claims swiftly. Redirecting even a small portion of the money spent on hotel accommodation towards staffing and improving the asylum process could lead to a more effective outcome, benefiting both asylum seekers and local communities. But this requires political will, it requires intelligence in Whitehall, better management of resources, and a move away from this punitive policy that has undermined trust in the system.